Howdy folks, Dave here at Thunder Mesa Studio, where it's time for another episode of Workbench Wednesday. I hope you're having a great day wherever you are and whenever you happen to be watching this. Today I want to talk about an optical illusion. Something that I'm often asked about, and I think it's a concept that's somewhat misunderstood. So I'm going to do a little explainer today on the use of forced perspective, particularly how that applies to our modeled scenes and dioramas. First, let's start with the definition. Forced perspective is a technique that uses an optical illusion that makes objects appear closer or farther away or larger or smaller than they actually are. And as you can imagine, that's a handy thing to know how to use in model making and particularly model railroading. Our perception can be manipulated by observing the relationship between items at different scales and or positions and the viewing angle of the spectator. So what does this mean for our models? Well, that last part, the viewing angle of the spectator, is very important. As an example, let's go to Disneyland for a minute. Say you're walking down Main Street, USA. A lot of people know that forced perspective is used in the buildings on Main Street, but they may not understand exactly how it works. So if you're down on Main Street at street level and you're looking up at the structures, they look taller than they actually are. And the reason for this is that the windows and the different stories get smaller as they go up. So the second story windows are a little bit smaller than the first story. The third story windows are a little bit smaller again. So looking up at it from street level makes them appear taller than they actually are. But here's the catch. Say you try and emulate that technique on a model structure for a diorama or a layout. And the second story windows are a little bit smaller than the first story, and the third story windows are a little bit shorter than the second story. And you plunk it down in your scene, and all of a sudden, instead of looking taller than it actually is, it looks short and squat. And the reason for this is the viewer's perspective, the spectator angle, the way you're looking at it. Down on Main Street, USA, we're looking up at the buildings from street level. On a diorama or model railroad, 99% of the time we're either looking down at the structures or we're looking at them ideally at eye level. And that's why you really have to pay close attention to the angle that objects are viewed from when trying to use any kind of forced perspective in a model. Unless that object is up above eye level, the entire effect is going to backfire, and the thing is going to look smaller than it actually is rather than larger. Let's take a look at a couple of examples of forced perspective here on the Thunder Mesa layout. First and foremost here is Baxter's Butte. You've got these layers of strata, and you'll notice with my hand up here, they get closer together and smaller as I go up towards the top, and that is very deliberate. That's to make them, the entire formation, appear taller than it actually is. So you observe this one and then you look up there and your brain tricks you into thinking that this is actually higher up and further away than it actually is. The same is true of the Nevermind here in the same scene. It's a much smaller structure than most people think, and you can see how big it actually is with my hand right here. But when you look up at it from track level, from say a train in the foreground down here, your brain makes you think it's further away or higher up than it actually is. The backdrop also uses a form of forced perspective. The cliffs and the details painted on them get smaller and more faded out the further away they're supposed to be from the viewer. That's actually forced perspective. So when you look at it from, say, the vantage point of the camera right there, looking through, it gives an incredible feeling of depth and distance. Any effective backdrop uses forced perspective. Your brain is programmed to think that the trees back here are the same size as the trees up here, so those must be very, very far away. By the way, I'm going to be using more forced perspective over here in the Rainbow Ridge scene pretty soon by adding a second layer of buildings, a layer of flats behind the structures in the front that'll be built at about half of O scale. And that way, when viewed from this angle, they'll look farther away. And I know the illusion will work because all of this is right about at eye level. The ON18 line up here above the ON30 main line also functions as a form of forced perspective. Even though this is modeled as 18-inch gauge, it's supposed to be 18-inch gauge. Visually, from most angles, people just assume that the trains up here might be the same size as the ones down here, and that makes them seem higher up and further away than they actually are. So it's a bit of passive forced perspective. And of course, the same is true of just about everything over here on Calico Mountain that's above the ON30 level. The bridges are smaller, the structures are smaller, everything gets a little bit smaller as you go up towards the top. So forced perspective can be used to add a feeling of depth and distance to our scenes and to make structures that are small look larger and farther away than they actually are. But is the reverse true? Can you use forced perspective to make small structures appear bigger if they're closer to you? Turns out you can. So if you remember the buildings on Main Street, USA, with the windows getting smaller as you go up towards the top of the building, which makes the buildings look taller when viewed from the street, what if you did the opposite? What if you took a model structure that's designed to be viewed at or near eye level or looked down on and added a little bit of extra height to it? What would the effect be there? Well, as you can see on the Sundance mine, it tends to make the structure look taller and more dramatic than it actually is. In fact, I like the effect so much that I use it all the time. And I call it reverse forced perspective, even though it's actually just regular forced perspective from a different angle. And I've used it here on Edda's place to add a little bit of charm and character to the building, make it look tall and skinny. Same thing again over here on the Undertaker's shop, Fowler's Landing here, and the riverboat too. I added a lot of extra gingerbread up here at the top to make it appear taller and more imposing than it actually is. Over here in Calico Town, yep, reverse forced perspective once again. The buildings are a little taller than they would be at scale. By the way, notice how that works with the ore bin and the bridges and track in the background. Makes all of that look much further away than it actually is. And there you have it. Forced perspective is a fantastic tool for the model maker. Whether you're a model railroader or diorama builder, whatever you happen to be doing, I encourage you to play around with it. You know, manipulate that viewer perspective to make your models appear larger, smaller, closer, or further away than they actually are. Now, if you have a favorite forced perspective technique that I didn't talk about here today, put it down in the comments below and we can discuss it there. I want to thank you all for watching these Workbench Wednesday episodes. They're a lot of fun for me to do. I really appreciate it. Please hit like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Hit that notification bell if you'd like to see more. And you can also follow Thunder Mesa over on Instagram at thunder.mesa and see everything that's new on the Thunder Mesa Studio website at thundermesa.studio. And if you really like what we're doing here on the channel and want to show your support, you can do what these nice folks did and head on over to patreon.com/thundermesa and show your support there. Until next time, keep moving forward, my friends. Adios for now.